You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker Podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker Podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And we are back on a Blue Monday with Larry Blustein, longtime South Florida reporter. Thanks for joining me today, Larry.
Oh, anytime, Marcus. You know that. It's a lot going on. Spring football is right around the corner. You finish up on basketball. You got wrestling. You got camps. You got 7-on-7s. You got combines. And I kind of brings me back to what somebody told me a couple of years ago, about 10 years ago. They go, after the season was over in December, they go, oh, now you got your easy part. As you know, it's nowhere near easy, especially the off season. In many cases, is busier than the regular season because the regular season you have your games on Thursday, Friday, and then the rest of the week is just regular practices. Now you got to kind of worry about the NILs, the transfer portals, the high school recruiting.
Yeah.
Now there's something on the table about high school football players getting paid under the NIL, which is not a very happy topic for high school coaches right now. So, and then 7-on-7s, which a lot of people, I try to go to as many as possible. I'm not a big, I don't follow the circuit around, because I see a lot of the kids. And then Under Armour Rivals, which is coming up in April for the combine. And as well as I do, because you've been around for a while, that a lot of these things become redundant because a lot of these kids go to the same things. And, and obviously in your case and in, everyone else, whether it be 24/7 or on 3, everybody wants to showcase the 4 and 5 stars. So it's it's a cycle, but something that I enjoy. It beats the alternative, and getting an opportunity to go to a lot of events kind of makes my weekend, and it's a good time.
Yeah, definitely. The football season never stops for us.
No.
7-on-7 camp. We got the UA camp coming up this weekend.
Yeah.
And then for me, I'm also covering basketball, baseball. It's a fun time for me because you got all 3 sports pretty much, major sports pretty much kind of going on at the same time.
Yeah, no doubt.
But in addition to 7-on-7 camps and all this other off-season stuff, there's also a coaching carousel thing that kind of happens, right? Like coaches find new jobs, players find new teams. But with the Miami Hurricanes, they lost their cornerbacks coach with Jamil Adai going to the Buffalo Bills. Happy for him. Great coach while he was here. He recruited some great players, developed some great players as well. Derek Porter Jr., I think, is developing into one of the best corners in the country, and not only just the conference. But Miami went ahead and hired Chevis Jackson, familiar with Lance Guidry over at Marshall. He's a guy, Alabama guy, went to LSU, made some stops at different places, as Kansas as being one of them. What do you think about the hire, and do you think it was the right move for the Miami Hurricanes?
I do. I think, like you said, the familiarity with working with the defensive coordinator who's trying to, keep this defense and trying to get this defense going. I think it's one less thing to worry about when you look at Coach Guidry because of the fact that he knows somebody who's on the same page as him and has worked with him, although it wasn't extensive time, but it was long enough where, when this position became available, that I'm sure that Mario Cristobal sat down with him and said, is there anybody that you have in mind? Which really good coaches do all the time. That's how it's done. It's not like, things are done by, committee. Even though you have a head coach, you certainly want to make everybody else feel comfortable. And I think it's a great idea. It's like you said, it's somebody who knows the game, has been around. He's coached some really, really good people in the past, that whether it be Marshall, as you said, he comes out of LSU and he's got a good sense of the game.
Yeah, I think he'll just kind of pick up where Adai has left off as far as developing players.
Right.
I think he probably needs to kind of get his feet wet, and as far as recruiting the area, and recruiting not only Florida or South Florida, but Georgia and Alabama. Those areas I think are some areas that he'll have to establish his footprint in,
Sure.
just like Jamil Adai did. I think he needs to focus on a couple of guys in particular, and Chris Ewald. As far as recruiting him to the University of Miami, and then I'm sure he'll have a say as far as DJ Pickett's concerned, that he was hired as the cornerbacks coach, but we all know that cornerbacks, safeties, coaches are very interchangeable or whatnot.
Sure.
So that'll be the challenge for him, and I think he's up for it, and I think that's the right move for the Miami Hurricanes.
Great situation for him, coming in and, having a lot of, you see, here's the thing. If you come in with a secondary that's totally established and you're going, oh boy, you got to play a lot of catch up. But here's one that there's a lot of new faces that he's going to be able to kind of, incorporate with what they had. And you mentioned Porter and being one of those guys, but they have a lot of young kids coming in. They have had a lot of transfers through the portal come in. So I think this is a perfect time to have hired him 3 weeks to a month before the spring is what it's all about, because he gets to put everything in a row. As you mentioned, they're recruiting for the future. Nowadays, as you know, you got to recruit the class that you have. You got to keep them on, you got to keep them around. So, and that's one of those things, there's, you look at even in the high school level with somebody like Max Edwards, who went from Booker T after a year of it being a defensive coordinator to Jackson. He's getting a lot of kids to come over from Booker T, and not because he's recruiting them, but people who got familiar with him, liked his style, liked how his approach was. And I think you're going to find the same thing here, with a coach, as you mentioned, that, that's wherever he's been a player's type of coach. The guys like him. He's been there, done that. So I think Coach Jackson will do fine.
Yeah, interesting to see how he develops guys like OJ Frederick, Ryan Mack,
Right.
Damari Brown going into his second year, expecting big things from him in year two. Robert Stafford, who's still there as well. So he's got, like you said, a bunch of young guys he can develop into some big time players.
Sure.
But we're going into spring football already. Blue, I feel like the year's kind of just blown by already. Spring football due to get started next week, and there's some players that I've been kind of going through each position group on CanesCounty.com and really just kind of seeing what battles are going to happen here in spring. But when you look at the offense this Miami offense, and you see some of these young guys about to kind of step into their own here, which player do you think are you most looking forward to see develop here in the spring?
Well, it's the obvious, Cam Ward. You want to see what here's a guy that comes over. I'm in a position of that was what, month and a half ago. Miami's scrambling around and everybody's making plans for Ja'Cory and making plans for everybody else, and then all of a sudden they get two guys, and the Reese Parfenberger guy, Parfenbarger, from U Albany by the way of Old Dominion, and then now they bring in Cam Ward, who is, as you say, who is target number one. And I think he's the guy because he's going to make the offense go. He's going to distribute the ball around. He's going to, he's got a dependable slot kid already, and all ACC and Restrepo to come back. I think what you're going to see a lot of in the spring is him working a lot of those Jacoby Georges into it, because, let's face it, you and I know Jacoby's kind of he's a live wire, but at the same time, he is potentially, wide receiver one.
Right.
So I think you want to establish that. I think he wants to get his tight ends, because that's been a real disappointment, I think. And you probably agree, and you and I talk about this at the games. Going back all the way to Will Mallory, target the tight ends, get tight ends. At one point with, Arroyo's been hurt, and you've been really handicapped there. But it's weird because this offensive coordinator and the previous offensive coordinator in Lashley, they targeted their tight ends before they got here 90 times during the season.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they get here and then they forget about that. And so I think those type of things you want to work on. They've got a really good and talented running game, but, with a couple of new faces, couple of existing guys. So I think that's, to me, I'm going to keep my eye on how the development of Cam Ward, trying to come up, with a formula where he feels comfortable. And I think during the spring he'll get that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how Cam Ward, kind of gels with the team and gels with the receivers. When you talk about the receivers, for me, it's all about that third wide receiver, because we know it's going to be X at slot and Jacoby George, either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, which is basically interchangeable anyway. It's just what side that they line up on. But who's that third wide receiver? Is it going to be Isaiah Horton? Is he going to be the guy?
He could be.
Are they going to just play 3 basically slot guys, and throw in a Ray Joseph in there?
Right.
Those are really kind of the battles that I think that will kind of erupt here in spring at wide receiver. And then it's the tight end, like you said. It's got to be Elijah Arroyo's year, right, Blue?
It has to be, because between you and I, if he doesn't get it this year, somebody like a Blustein will pass him by real quickly, because Blustein is Brevin Jordan 2.0. Here's a guy who's very athletic, can play like 5 different positions, but he gets on the football field and he makes plays. And it's awfully tough when someone's making plays, to keep them out of the mix. But I would hope that somebody like Arroyo would be healthy and be back on the field, because he was obviously Cam McCormick, but he's not a guy that you're gonna want to go on every down with. Riley Williams, who's had a pretty good he's been another guy. So I would think you're 100% right. Arroyo's got to get it this year. If he stays healthy, he's going to be really lethal. But they got to target him. Their tight ends got to end up catching 70 balls. They really do. For them to be effective all the way around, that's what happened when he was at Houston and when Lashley was at SMU to begin with. They were coming up with formulas where their tight ends were very integral, to the offense.
Yeah, definitely want to see at least 70 targets. That would be awesome to see. Based on what we've seen in the last couple of years, I doubt it, but you never know.
I hear you.
With Cam Ward in the fold and Shannon Dawson with another year under his belt. The only other position for me on offense is that 5th offensive lineman, right? Because I think 4 of those guys we pretty much think will kind of guarantee start. Nothing's a guarantee, but I do feel like Jalen Rivers, Francis Mauigoa, Inez Cooper, and then the transfer that they brought in, Zach Carpenter, are going to
center, right?
But that 5th guy, Matt McCoy, is he going to step up? Is it going to be Samson Okunlola, the other 5-star from a couple cycles ago, or maybe someone else like a Kinsler or
that's not right. The Inez Cooper did really well last year. They loved him. As you mentioned, the Mauigoa kid, who's obviously he's going to be a staple there. He stays healthy. He had shoulder surgery in the off season, which would probably keep him out of a lot of the action during the spring. But with that being said, that kind of opens up, things for, as you said, for a Matt McCoy or a Tommy Kinsler, to come in. Obviously the Logan Sagapola is another guy who's worked extremely hard, especially weight room. So, but the good thing about it is we're talking about quality kids. This isn't, where we were just like pulling things out of the air over the last couple of years. So, well, he would be good here. Well, you already have players that are going to be, and then obviously you have a really good recruiting class the last couple of years that's going to kind of, keep this pipeline going. So, yeah, but it's a good thing that we're looking for one guy and not for five.
Right. Absolutely. Times have changed for sure under the crystal ball era. Let's switch over to the defense really quickly here. On defense, you got a lot of guys who are returning and a couple of guys that are new as well, especially in that defensive backfield. You got to say John Riley, you got to Michelle Powell. But we talked about the corners already, but linebackers were pretty much kind of see Francisco Malinoa as well as a Wesley Basaint. And then on the D line, Ruben Bain is coming hit full force for his second year.
Yeah.
Actually, Kelly, we're expecting another a year from him, hopefully without injury this time. And then Akeem Mesidor, I think people forget about him. He is going to be coming back from injury, so we'll see how he plays. And then some guys from the portal as well. We got a Marley Cook that's making noise. He set the record for the squats for the University of Miami, and Elijah Alston also coming from Marshall along with Chevis Jackson. It's a kind of a Marshall reunion now.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So who for you?
Well, obviously that nose tackle position, Thomas Gore, Ahmad Moten. Those are two big, strong guys who could kind of set the tempo because, as you mentioned, Ruben Bain, until he leaves, he's going to be the staple, there for them. As you mentioned, they're defensive ends. And I think by you and I talking at this time next year, Miami will probably have the best group of edge and defensive ends in the country. They will. I mean, because look at what they went out and got. Look at what Jason Taylor's been able to, to bring in and then develop like Nigel Lee Kelly. And you mentioned Akeem Mesidor and you got guys like, Jaden Wayne, who, I mean, if you watch that kid, especially off the line of scrimmage, he's got long arms. He's done tremendous. And then all the guys that they brought in, this isn't a position where they're going to say, well, let's already start like Marcus Lightfoot. But those are guys that can come in and blend in, the Armando Blants and, guys like that who you're not going to lose a whole lot by interchanging them. I mean, you don't want to come in and start 5 freshmen, but you have those guys like the Cole McConaughey kid from up in the Alabama area who played at Spanish Fork. And, and I watched him on tape and I think that kid has a chance to be really, really special. And then as we mentioned, Booker Pickett Jr., who's cat quick, got to obviously gain some weight down the same thing with Elias Rudolph, who didn't play last year. But he kind of, and then the guy I think that he's going to get in the mix sometime this year, and you won't get him out as the Artavius Jones kid from Blustein, and I remember back in his 9th grade year when they were up at state and Coach Johns at the time told me, he goes, that kid right there, 9th grader, he says, watch him. He's going to be very special over the next few years. And not only that, he's the type of kid you bring home to dinner and everybody loves him. And, that's a ringing endorsement, because that means he's going to get along with everybody. He's going to be that team guy. He's going to be that locker room, solid locker room guy. And people have to understand, Marcus, that, especially football, with 90 guys in the locker room, if you have that stable force in there and some guy who everybody looks up to and that's why even though we kind of make fun a little bit of somebody like a 9th year guy like Cam McCormick,
Yeah.
He's a stable force in there because everybody, while they kind of kid him, being, his age, at the same time, that's what Miami's been missing. Miami's been missing that leadership, uh, in the locker room, on the football field. And I think that's what turns things around when you have that. And you mentioned up front with the Jalen Rivers, somebody like that, or a Carpenter who's coming in with a lot of experience, just like Matt Lee did. Matt Lee was a first-year guy, but hey, he was everybody looked up to him because he was a productive guy. He stayed healthy. He was on the field all the time. So I think there's a lot more to it. A lot of these people don't understand. And then obviously we talked about the quarterback, running back position, but you made a great point. The secondary as they go in is not real stable. From an individual talent standpoint, they're good. Caleb Spencer really hasn't gotten the wrapping taken off of him yet. The Brian Ballum kid, in addition to all the young men that you mentioned, and the Robert Staffords and players like that. So yeah, I'm excited the potential that they have secondary wise, because you lost two key figures. And Kinchins and Williams. They were not only producers, but they were leaders. They were guys that people looked up to, and the younger kids said, "Oh, geez, look, Cam's everywhere." I want to watch him and see how he does it. So,
yeah, definitely excited to see how this defensive secondary develops here in the spring. But what about on offense? What about on offense? We talked a lot about it, the 2024 guys that we think will kind of pop here in the spring.
Right.
What about on the offense here? You got 3 receivers coming in, that I think will compete for that wide receiver 3, 4, 5 spot.
Definitely.
Right off the bat.
Carr and Trader definitely are two guys that have played at a high level before, and they're kind of used to that. They're kind of used to that. They have that ice water in their veins type, and those are the kids that excel. But I think those two guys right there. You watch Nye Carr's film, and this kid, he was a big time kid. And I watched hit the game when Moultrie played against Milton with future quarterback for Miami, a kid who's doing tremendous during the summer too. But I think we all know, and you've watched Josiah Trader enough all the way back since his Pace days, and then followed him for a year at Central, and won a state title, and at Chaminade the last couple of years. So I think those are two guys that could definitely break in.
Yeah, definitely. Excited to see them. Also excited to see the running backs develop as well, the young guys, as far as Christopher Johnson Jr. and Jai Allen, especially with Mark Fletcher, we know will not be available for spring due to the injury that he suffered during the Pinstripe Bowl. So it's an opportunity for those guys to really kind of show what they can do. You were at the Orange Bowl camp this week, so I kind of did want to talk about that this week. It's camp season, and if you could just tell me a little bit about that camp and just how the kids really benefited from a camp such as that.
Well, Marcus, this is a really good idea. Now, there's a lot of kids, as well as I do. You watch a lot of high school games down here, and you see a lot of these players, and you shake your head and they go, "Oh man, how come he's not getting more interest?" And a lot of these areas throughout the country, Florida included, host these small college recruiting fairs where, the NAIA schools, and you can't knock the NAIA schools. We have the national champions sitting in West Palm Beach and Kaiser. And sometimes what happens in these small college recruiting fairs is, those colleges will come down and they'll meet with the coaches, and the coaches will show them film. And then, if the coaches are interested, next day the parents come in and the kids come in, for, a sit down to talk about finances, how they can, make this a reality. But what the Orange Bowl Showcase has done is added another dimension. What they do is they do those film things on a Friday night and a coach's social, and it's nice. They have some food and some beverages, and sit down and watch film and kind of chat with all the college coaches. This year they had 45 different colleges come in. And obviously we have plenty of them in the state of Florida with St. Thomas University and Florida Memorial and obviously Kaiser as being NAIA schools. But you also have your Stetsons and you have your West Floridas who also can come to these events. And then you have a massive amount of Division II, Division III. And we have a lot of prep schools like MTI and Palm Beach Prep. And so they come, and on this Saturday, what they do for 6 hours is these kids test. They do their combine stuff, and as soon as they're finished with their combine drills, they go through their one-on-ones and break into groups. And all these coaches, these college coaches, are walking around with pen in hand and video and checking these kids out, because you remember this. And this is the one thing that I think by hosting those events in the past is when you finish, most of these kids finish at the end of November, middle November. Between then and now, you have almost 5 months. And when you have a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, the growth spurt. So when you had a 5'7", 160-pound kid, that kid could be 5'9", 190 now. And it changes your entire recruitability of the player. And that, especially in this landscape with NIL, the transfer portals, it's schools like these, like the NAIAs and the smaller schools that are benefiting in a great way, because a lot of these kids, it's sort of like that little funnels being pushed down now. And a lot of these kids would play, 1AA type of football in the past, or go into Division II and Division III, because that's just how it's being dictated. So these things are gold mines. Yeah, Brady Quinn, former NFL quarterback, analyst, running the quarterbacks. Yeah, Dave Shula, who's been an NFL coach with the Bengals. He played, obviously his family's lineage. Those are two of the guys. Travis Taylor, former Florida Gator, NFL star. They were all running. It wasn't like they were just grabbing high school coaches, but they were getting NFL experience guys who could evaluate, who could teach. And it's, everybody had left. I mean, it was a free event. All you had to do was have a 2.5, 2.6 GPA. And they opened it to juniors this year. So you get that instruction. You get all those college coaches that you would sit there for hours and hours and sending them tapes and stuff. They're all right there. You get a shirt. They feed you lunch. It's amazing. It's amazing. And every kid and their parent that I talked to on the way out, not one person had a bad thing to say. They're all, man, this was great. And, a lot of these people, like Ty Wise, former University of Florida, Miami center, he brought 5 kids from Pensacola down.
Wow.
I mean, because he saw the need. He saw the need of being able to perform. He knows as a former player. You had kids come from Jacksonville. You had 20 kids come from the Orlando and Tampa areas. And then obviously, the local kids from Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and the Keys took advantage of it. And I think this is something that people have to wake up, nationwide and add this element to it. And that element really, and I'm getting kids today who are texting me and telling me, hey, 5 colleges, want to see, more of me. And I got a good, and we have one kid who actually signed with Allegheny College out of Pennsylvania. So, just out of this event. And last year, the Orange Bowl awarded over $7 million of scholarship money to these kids, because, these are not free rides, because of the fact that these colleges, and, the smaller schools, in the Midwest and in the Northeast are often the lifeline of these communities. They're built around that, just like a Florida or a Mississippi State or, FSU is built around those smaller cities. Well, these Division II, Division III schools are the same way, and they're all highly educational institutions that have a tremendous lineage of people working in the, in the business end of things, and, medical. So it's a win-win. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. So it kind of was a break for me from watching the 7-on-7s where they try to spotlight all these 4 and 5 stars. Well, here's kids that were no stars.
Awesome. Really awesome stuff. The Orange Bowl showcase. the thing that kind of stood out to me when you were talking was that the fact that juniors are able to go out there
Yeah, yeah.
and
They added
45,
that this year. They added
yeah,
that this year.
and 45 schools. I mean, come on, like
45 colleges, I'm telling you. And, and if you know anything about the smaller colleges, having is some of those real good Midwest D2s like Anderson and Heidelberg and schools like that. Those are powers, like Olivet and schools like that. If you look them up, you'll see. And then even a lot now in the Super Bowl, I try to challenge these kids. Listen to the starting lineups of some of these games, and you'll see that not everybody's FSU and Ohio State and USC and Miami, but you got a
right,
lot of South Carolina State, a lot of MEAC schools. You got a
yeah,
lot of HBCU schools, and
yeah,
that's
JUCOs
why
as well.
JUCOs too. But that's what I'm saying. There's a gravitation towards HBCU now with the success of Florida A&M and Howard and schools like that. When I was growing up, that's the way it was. That's Southern, Grambling, schools like that were huge back then, and I think that now, especially with what Willie Simmons did at Florida A&M before leaving for Duke, and I think those programs now, people are seeing that they're recruiting everybody, not just the black kids, but there's a lot of white kids going to a lot of these schools
Yeah.
because of the fact that it's great football and it's great exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I let you go, Blue, I mean, we talked about, obviously the Orange Bowl Showcase, who features, players that are under the radar, but
Right.
what players, because we got the UA camp coming up this weekend, you also have Rivals camp coming up in about a month. What are the players, since of course this is a University of Miami podcast, that Miami are like must gets for South Florida for the 2025 class for you?
Well, yeah. Well, you and I mentioned a bunch of those kids. I mean, we talked about, a lot of the players from down this way, and the Josh Moores and the Courtney, and then the Millses and
Cortez
guys
Mills,
like
yeah.
that who Cortez Mills, who are guys that a lot of these people, that are coveting nationally. And that's one of the things that we've been fortunate to watch a lot of these guys over the last few years. Ezekiel Marceline, who's another in the lineage of great Miami Central players. And yeah, there's a lot of kids. I mean, I think you brought one up before, a kid that's at Chris Ewald, who was,
Yeah.
who was a Michigan commit. Now he's backed off, and those are the type of guys I think that that you look at in Miami definitely will be in on them, and not just down here. I mean, statewide guys. I mean, because if you look, a lot of these kids are now making commitments, and but I mean, you look at any of these schools, and whether it be the Chaminades or St. Thomas's, who has another good group of kids coming through, and the Centrals in the Northwest. Central just brought in 3 kids who were national rated kids from LaSalle Academy in Rhode Island, and another kid, a linebacker, who was from Mobile Christian, and those are what happens down here, in South Florida. A lot of these people want to gravitate to this area because of the fact that there's so much talent, and then also you look at the next wave of talent with Malachi Tony, who's committed to Miami, and also Jacob Brady, or Jabari Brady, who is another guy. So yeah,
Another one, 26.
yeah, the beat goes on. I mean, you have so much talent, coming up with a lot of these kids, and and like you said, with the Under Armour coming up, and some of these other events that you see 7-on-7s, you're seeing a ton of talent through these 7-on-7 events. So yeah, I there's so many, and as we join you, during the spring and stuff, we'll have a listing of kids that that become more of a reality. Right now, there's a lot of offers for 25 and 26, and kids are committing, but as we've seen, they could decommit as easily, and especially with the portal and the NIL deals, a lot of these kids don't stick. And because all of a sudden somebody's going to offer X amount of dollars, which is, another topic, which I'm not, it's not just being an OG and it's not being old school. It's just being the reality of things the way they are now. It's, I think what you're going to see is a lot of the older college coaches go to the NFL. Charlie Partridge started the exodus. You saw it, not that he's old, but Coach Adai go into the NFL. It's an easier deal because of the fact that now, instead of back in the day when you were recruiting these kids, you figured, well, we'd have them at least for 3 years. You're lucky to keep them anymore. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of these older coaches, who spend 16 months trying to recruit a kid. He comes and then the next year he leaves.
Yeah, we saw this with the great Nick Saban going away
that's why he left
college game. So it's going to continue, and it's kind of trickled down to the high school gridiron as well, as far as transferring and maybe NIL in the future. So one kid I do want to say that is a must get for Miami for me is Randy Adarica. I think that
love him.
Miami has to kind of stay on this kid and to continue that pipeline of defensive ends now from Miami Central, the powerhouse on 95th Street. So
I agree. But he's still under the radar too for many. Many just don't, they don't equate him as being a true Power 5 stud. But the kid, watch his film, you'll see he's a lead. He's turned into a pretty good leader. But you're 100% right. You got to keep, you're never going to get all the local kids. I mean, in that, even when Miami was beating everybody senseless, they didn't get all the local kids. Marvin Jones would leave, Steve Hutchinson would leave, Isaac Bruce would leave. That's just the way it is. You can't get everybody, but Miami's got to, and I think they've done pretty well over the last couple of years, as you mentioned, by getting a Bain, by getting a Blunt, by getting a Ray, guys that everybody else wanted. There was a time when Miami would fight, for guys who FAU wanted or FIU wanted, but now they're stealing guys like Scott away from, Ohio State, and they're taking kids from Alabama, and they're taking kids that FSU and Florida wanted. So, that's all they have to do now, Marcus, is maintain that. And the only way you maintain that is by winning. And obviously, as we get closer to the season, you and I'll break down, the team, who they have on the schedule. But, from afar, I think 9 and 10 wins is not far-fetched. So, and that will keep this pipeline going.
Absolutely.
It'll keep us happy at the games.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, winning cures everything. Larry Blustein, ladies and gentlemen, kind enough to join me on a Blue Monday. Thanks again for joining me on the Storm Tracker podcast once again, Larry.
Anytime, Marcus. Thank you.
And that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, and also subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Until the next episode.